Good everybody, welcome to another episode of Unlocking the Secrets to Expanding Human Potential. My name is Greg Riley. Got a special guest with today. Michael is he's off tonight. He's busier than I am, really. That's the nut of it, right? Today we've got Julian Palmer back on, who is one of our biggest podcasts, actually, as far as viewing went. So we thought we'd have him back on again because Julian's got a documentary that's just about to be released, and we thought we'd interview him and ask him about the documentary and why he started and how it got about and all that kind of stuff. And because I think it's very much worth listening to that, and especially one of the pioneers in plant medicine in Australia, I think it's great to be able to share what he's created with the wider audience. So, Julian, welcome back to our podcast, and great to have you again.
Thanks, Greg. I was good to hear. I was your biggest guest.
One of the biggest, second biggest guests, I think.
Second biggest. Damn.
It's funny. When I'm collecting the stats for the YouTube stats, is actually you're the biggest search person. So number one as far as searches go. Number two in listening. So it's really, really good. So, and you're still getting hits on that podcast we did a while ago. So it's actually, every week I get the stats, it comes up and it's like, Julian's had 15 more listens and stuff like that. So it's really good stuff. But this is all about you, mate. This is all about you. Tell us about Contemplations, the documentary, why you started it, and what is it about?
Yeah, so it's a docu-series. So it's going to be, my video editor, we're not exactly sure how many parts is going to be. At this point, it's looking like 4 hours at this point, like 5 parts. So I had the idea that what we needed was to condense down the wisdom of the Australian psychedelic scene. And I've been all around the world in many different scenes all around the world. The Australian psychedelic entheogenic scene is particularly unique and interesting. And if you're an Australian person and you just live here, you wouldn't know that because you haven't been to Germany, you haven't been to America or England and checked out the scenes there.
So tell us a bit about that.
I think What's that?
So finish that and then tell us a bit about those different...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because I think it's quite interesting to see what the difference is, but keep going and then tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so Kalindi Iyi, I don't know if you've come across him. He is a big black guy from Detroit. He actually died last April from COVID. But he was well known for taking very large doses of magic mushrooms. He was a big black guy who was into African martial arts, and I met him at, I think it was EGA in 2010. It was earlier than that. It was 2007 I first met him.
Wow.
And he went to all the conferences overseas, all over the world, and he said the Australian scene was light years ahead of anywhere else. And I would say, yeah, Australia has a unique and distinctive network of people. You have a lot of, for the population, which is, probably the same as, say, Florida in America, thereabouts. I couldn't have done this docu-series in, for example, the United Kingdom. I couldn't have done it in France, in Germany. Maybe if I lived there, I could, but Australia has a lot of people for the population who are into this. And that has been really supported by the climate, for one thing. There's an outdoor culture where people can take things like mushrooms outside, whereas in, say, Scandinavia, you've got 2 months of the year where it's like you can sort of go outside and participate in an outdoor lifestyle. And you've also got mushrooms grow in Australia. They grow indigenously. People can pick them all in the eastern states pretty much all over the country. And then you've got the acacia trees, the wattle, which has DMT in it, which means that people can, go out into nature and find what they want to find. But also you've got the ability for people to grow their own plants. I got involved in the ethnobotanical scene in the early noughties, and a lot of those people were people who just grew plants. Say if you're in Germany, you just can't grow plants. The plants won't grow as easily that are psychotropic, because a lot of them are southern plants from the southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
So basically I interviewed over 50 people, and I could have interviewed another few hundred people, but they were the people that I interviewed. And I wanted to kind of distill the wisdom and understanding that has developed in the Australian community, and try and bring it together in one form as a resource, so that people can really help people contextualize and understand this space. Because what we have is a lot of people coming into this space who don't really know maybe what they need to know. And it takes a lot of time to develop the wisdom, and to also just really, on the informational side, that's kind of easy with Google and with books. That's one of the reasons I wrote my book Articulations, is so people wouldn't ask me questions anymore. So that you say, just read the book, it's all in there. I've answered everything that people have asked me. I've answered all the questions that people commonly ask. It's all in there.
I'll put a link in this, underneath this for the articulation. So I've got that. So I'll put a link in.
So the idea with the docuseries is to distill the wisdom of the people in Australia, because our whole culture, Western society, is so programmed to believe in information, ideology, ideas, all these mental forms, and worship them. They're like, oh, they're a whole science and information and this and that. That's not important when it comes to these states. What's important is our ability to interpret, to digest, to understand, to really know how to grapple with what's happening to us and how to integrate that. So that was really the idea, to kind of focus on the humans and have humans talk about their own experience, which for some people was quite a hurdle. They even when I did the interviews, it was actually 3 years ago, I did most of them, that then the climate wasn't so friendly, even as it is now, that people were quite a little bit reticent to come forward and say, hey, I actually do this. This is something that I do. And there's not that much of that, not much of this in the media that we see. I mean, there's some documentaries where you have some famous comedians and people like Dennis McKenna talk about their experiences, but not like just regular people describing what's happened to them and how they've dealt with it. So I've tried to kind of weave this together to tell a whole bunch of different stories from different people that I think a lot of people will be able to identify with, and they'll be able to understand their own story on what it means. Because I think with the psychedelic states, it can be just so, the information you get can be so overwhelming that it's really hard to sort of put it together and patch it together. And so a lot of this is we're really hearing people explain how they put it together, how they patch it together, how it helped them, what pitfalls they came across, what difficulties they had, and go into it in a way that's not designed to be a public relations exercise for psychedelics, because we've got enough of that already with all this scientific research saying that psychedelics can, fix this and fix that and help with that. More like what is most useful at this point is that people know that, hey, this is not real easy stuff. This can be very challenging and difficult and tricky, and this is what you need to look out for. This is what other people have found. So there's aspects to aspects of the film where people are talking about their experiences, and it's shocking and dark and crazy, and you're not supposed to have any easy answers about these experiences. I don't have any easy answers or explanations or even anything positive at all that's come out of some people's experiences. It's supposed to just allow you to keep asking more questions and to be on your toes, because I think that's what psychedelics do. They don't offer any easy answers. They don't put everything on a plate. They really they challenge us. And I think that's really important, like in our society. Of course, we have all the mental challenges and our day-to-day problems, but a lot of people are living in a kind of like cotton wool reality where they're not like severely challenged like our forefathers were, say, in the field of warfare and disease like the Black Death, like COVID-19 has nothing on the Black Death. What did it kill? Like a third of Europe or something like that. So it's just the short lifespan, and life is just so hard. And I think we can get to that place with psychedelics where we can really find a wild edge of reality that can really, help us to make contact with a kind of urgency within the nature of reality that can bring us back to our soul, really.
Yeah, I think look, you've done it. Why I'm so excited about this is I know when I first started looking at this stuff, it was, you've got DMT, the spirit molecule, you got the reality of truth, you got Dennis McKenna's stuff, like you're saying. I think it's great that you actually bring something out that has a lot of depth and difference as well too, and being able to show people some other aspects of it as well too, because there is that stuff in there where you do have an experience, and it is very, very challenging, and sometimes it gives you more questions than answers out of it, right? But tell us some of the interviews that you're really, really happy with. If not give too much detail away, but tell us about some of the ones you were really excited to, and that you were excited to put on the doco.
Well, yeah, there's one in particular that is, interestingly enough, it's a very high dose Amanita muscaria experience.
Wow.
Which is not something you really hear about. And I've known the man who had this experience for many years, and he's talked about his experience, he's written it down.
Yep.
And we're getting a animator, a very advanced animator to animate this. He's presently doing the animation now.
Yep.
And it's based on the Unreal Engine. So it's very, very advanced animation. And his story involves having an understanding of what it is to be God. So wow. He's taken through a journey of what it is to be God and living all these different human beings at the same time.
Wow.
In the negative and positive aspects of their experience.
Wow, that is something that in itself is just enough to actually watch it. That is amazing to be able to, even articulate that in some way, in some kind of word.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, he nails it. He nails it in one take.
Wow.
You know, and we're getting it animated, so it'll really show in a way how deep you can go. You know, and
Yep.
this experience completely changed his life.
Yeah.
You know, from that experience, he realizes that he is ultimately interconnected with everything and has a great deal of gratitude and thankfulness for his life. And yeah, really got some deep insight. So I think this sort of experience is kind of beyond it's on the level of information that a prophet is really, you know, in the olden days, a prophet would write down their experience. So I feel this experience and several others as well, they're very similar, that they do show you deeper layers and levels of reality, and how and perhaps can give insight into how things can work and what we can understand about reality, human reality, but deeper realities, you know.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, I've got a list of people I'm going to send this to as soon as it comes out. Tell us about having to film and integrate some of the darker stuff of the genes people had, and trying to balance that with the lighter side of things and not make the documentary too fearful or too dark.
Well, you know, it was actually a little bit hard to pull the darker experiences out from people. People would try to give a public face like, oh, I don't want to let down the team, you know, team psychedelic here. Like, it's, you know, people didn't want to scare people off. But one of the people I interviewed was a famous YouTuber called Your Mate Tom. I think he's got something ridiculous, like a few 100,000 subscribers, and he's a Melbourne-based YouTuber. And he had an experience with 5 grams of iboga root bark that catalyzed him into an existential crisis. And I think when it comes to these existential crises, the seeds of them are already in us. Yeah. It's not like the iboga is pulling his leg and going, hey, buddy, like, you know, it's like playing with him just about reality. He's just saying, no, buddy, this is how it is. Yeah. Check it out. Yeah. And he had to deal with his own patterns and programs and deconstruct that and come to balance and alignment within himself. And that was a real challenge for him. He went on a huge process. So it's not like the iboga's trying to pull his leg or pull a fast one on him. Or people say with the iboga, they think it's going to hit them over the head with a 4x2. Yeah. But it's just telling you the truth. Like, I know this one guy who the iboga told him, if you're going to continue living your life in this way, in such an unconscious manner that you have been, this is what your future lifetime is going to look like. And it shocked him so much he didn't speak for a week.
Wow.
And it's not that the iboga wasn't deceiving him, or it was just being brutally honest with him and where he's at. So I think that's something brilliant about the plants and psychedelics, that they show you the raw reality that's beyond that's really beyond our cultural programming. Like Terence McKenna said, you can really deprogram all the illusions and fantasies and elements in culture, and really hopefully come to a really grounded, solid place where you're aligned with deeper realities and how things work in a deeper sense. So yeah, but it wasn't really that hard
Yeah.
to balance the positive and the negative, because there's so much positive there too. There's so much beauty,
Yeah.
and our culture hasn't come to terms with it. Our culture is still yet to come to Western culture. Most people we come across, say in a city like Melbourne, you talk to them about, do you believe in spirits? Do you believe in nature spirits? Do you believe in other dimensions? All that sort of stuff. And you're going to get from most people probably a sort of agnostic, unsure, not very convinced viewpoint.
Yep.
Whereas I was I spent a fair bit of time in Brazil. In Brazil, everyone believes in spirits.
Yeah, correct.
It's like they think I tell them about Australia, and they're like, really? People don't believe in spirits? That's really weird,
Yeah.
And you go to some other cultures, maybe Sweden, for example, where atheism is really big, and there's even less belief in any, phenomena. I find, Northern Europe is probably, the more north you go, the colder it gets, the shorter the summer, less sunlight there is. You tend to get this more agnostic / atheistic viewpoint, and a much more heady viewpoint. For example, I gave a talk in the Netherlands in it was 2019, I think.
Yep.
And they've got a very much more theoretical view of the phenomena, and say the DMT-Ls. So I want in this series, I wanted to find people who would say, nope, the DMT-Ls are not real, they don't exist, and really have that character, as a counterpoint to other people. But I only found one person. Wow. And I'm not plugged in. I just couldn't find anyone to communicate that perspective. In general, you would have people say, well, took me a while, but eventually I had to come to terms that this was actually happening, and it wasn't just my own mind. And that's what most people come to who keep doing this.
Yeah.
And then there was a few people who were just sort of agnostic or sitting on the fence, and they didn't really know, or just that was fairly common. But there was only one guy who I knew had this perspective, and he doesn't really, my video editor's like, come on, we need, he doesn't believe me. I'm like, dude, I know a lot of people in the Australian scene, and I was looking for people who have some experience, who have this very, very skeptic ideology, and I couldn't find them. And I think what I did do was a survey, in a way, of people, and I was expecting more people to just say, look, these spirits are not real. But I had this guy, Sebastian Job, who was a lecturer, who is a lecturer at Sydney Uni in anthropology, and he did an academic study into DMT entities. Which is kind of cool and adventurous. And he was sort of sitting on the fence a little bit, but he was also saying, like, you got to be careful. Well, I started to do this, and I was finding they were affecting my life, and it was quite full on, and you really got to watch out what you're dealing with. So, I would say in Australia, which is because there is more DMT going around, there's the wattles around, and generally the understanding that people have is like, had to come to terms with the phenomena as it is and as it presents itself, rather than having some elaborate theoretical explanation for it. And yeah, in the world today, there's just a handful of people who have this skeptic ideology. There's like James Kent, an American guy. There's Benny Shannon, who's a professor in Israel. And there's a Dutch locksmith called Daniel Waterman.
Yep.
And that's about it. Like, there's not really other people in the global scene who say, no, it's all your own. It's all projection of the human mind. There's only a handful of people pushing that cart, because if you use Occam's razor as it should be used, the simplest and most elegant explanation is normally it should be the true one.
Yeah.
And it's actually, there's nothing to decode. It's like, oh, that hyper interdimensional fairy actually is a hyperdimensional fairy.
Yeah.
It's no theory or grand unified cosmology is required. You just need to accept what what is in fact generally a hyperreal experience, which is exceedingly often very, very sophisticated, and can be eye-poppingly profound. So yeah, I think that this is a big part of it. And I think I kind of wanted to be objective and give some argument about this, but at the end of the day, we're in the midst of a paradigm shift, and the paradigm is that actually with the tryptamines especially, we are having to come to terms that these beings are real and humanity is not alone in a profound metaphysical sense, that we just what's going on in this dimension is just one little part of a much bigger play of consciousness. And that becomes fairly obvious. And when you have that experience, it's kind of relieving. You don't feel the weight of, having to live as if that you're this profound accident, and you've got the weight of the world is on you to understand it or make something of it, or I don't know, because I don't know the plight of the atheist who believes that in Darwin's theory of evolution that we just accidentally happen to be here. I'm a bit unplugged from that. I kind of see human life as being a creative miracle in its own way. But if you want to believe that it's all just like a miracle, that it all just magically manifested out of chaos via random chance, more power to you. But it doesn't really give you an insight into the nature of consciousness and how interconnected it is, and how profound that awareness is. And it gives you, I think that awareness gives you a sense that you're actually, there's a sense of home, that there's actually, that you have some coordinates in your reality, that there's much more out there that you are moving towards, that you've come from. That it gives you a sense that the place and purpose, perhaps a sense of fundamental meaning, that all this means something, that there's a reason behind it, stuff like that, which I think a lot of people are missing. They're just like, well, I happen to be here, well, I might as well just maximize my individual ideology of what gives me the most pleasure, serotonin, whatever. And I think that can be very nihilistic, so
I mean, just
anyway.
these days it's just like, there's so much of the hustle, and people got to hustle, and it's just so much of this thing about having to achieve something and get to a destination, and people are missing the fact that the destination's got nothing to do with it. It's the journey that happens. That's the beauty of life. So tell us a bit. Did you come across anybody that was looking for psychedelics to fix their issues? Because I know a lot of people, like you were saying before, they come into this and they kind of go, well, I hope this takes away my alcohol, or hope to take away my meth habit, or all that kind of stuff. Did you interview anyone like that who was hoping that the plant medicine would take this from them?
Well, you know what? I've been really, because I get a lot of emails from people, that's been something that's really been going off the charts these last few years. That people have like, oh, I've got this PTSD and I got this depression, and I want the plants to help me to fix that. So there's one story about a guy who goes to Peru, and he's just expecting to have an experience taking the cactus, and it completely heals his knee. Like, it's a physical issue. He's not expecting, he's an instant convert. He's just like, holy shit, in one session, I'm just healed. Hallelujah. So there is that story, but I'm more focusing on rather than this kind of like remedial massage sort of idea of medicalized psychedelics. I'm more focused on how they can change the human mind and psyche with the right mindset. And I think what people talk about is a change in values.
Yes.
A change of values. And some people describe it very well, away from the ego, away from, short-term striving, security, all that, to having a more coherent, sophisticated, meaningful set of values where they're living their lives directed towards greater meaning and fulfillment. So I was having more of that. That was the general sort of story. And I think especially the last few years, that you've got all this this medicalized idea that psychedelics can cure depression and PTSD and anxiety, and they can do those things, and that's fairly straightforward for them to do with assistance. It's not that hard. Even say intramuscular ketamine can just reset the circuitry to pull people out of depression. But that's not the most valuable thing that psychedelics could do. I was more focusing on how they can help people really change their worldview, which was, one of nihilism, and like you were saying, hustling and working, and in a way that is not really helping them to live the life that they want to live. So I think I was more focusing and really more receptive to the revolution that psychedelics can create in your mind, how they can really transform your mental, psychic, emotional landscape to one that's like got a lot more richness and depth to it. So that kind of just throws out all these much baser motivations and all the stuff that really creates problems for people's lives, because their intentions not set toward anything's meaningful or worthwhile. There's that kind of aimlessness of the consumerist mindset. So we're in a very interesting phase in history when the whole space is going completely bananas with the amount of money. Even the Australian government, it was like a couple of days ago, was like giving $50 million to research in psychedelics, because for the mental landscape of the human being, this is the tool. You
Mm.
know, I know a professor of psychiatry who says psychiatry compared to where it is now, like psychedelics are like the tool, like to zero in and zoom in on the human mind.
Yeah.
And this is where we're at. This is where we're at as a culture, as a species, that we can go zoom in, zero in on the psyche, on the soul. And it's a bigger revolution as the telescope or the microscope into understanding the physical world. And the paradigm shift that we're in is that in general, most people haven't begun to understand the metaphysical world. Some of us who have a sensitivity or awareness or capacity to have awareness of that. But I think that's the real revolution or paradigm shift that we're facing, and that psychedelics are going to allow complete transformation of what we call science is going to completely shift. Because it's like, you know, when in the early days, when people were looking through the telescope, it was like, hey, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Are you seeing that planet up there?
Yeah.
And then the other guy, you know, the country was saying, yeah, I see that planet too.
Yep.
And it's a little bit like that with the psychedelics. It's like, oh, when you go into that dimension, are you seeing that blue god there? Yep, I'm seeing him. So in a sense, what's happening is we are developing, you know, we have this tool which is enabling a shared understanding, and that will develop more and more into a sophisticated understanding of reality.
Yep.
So yeah, that's how I see it.
So tell us, did you, going through all the stuff, interviewing all these people, did you learn anything new that you may have actually thought, oh, that's actually something I hadn't contemplated before? Like, did you come across anything that sort of, you know, opened your eyes up in other areas?
Not really.
No.
Not really. I've been around
Well,
the
I'll ask
traps.
anyway. Yeah.
It's these days, it's like people tell me their experience, and they say, I know this is going to sound weird. And I'm like, yeah, well, I've heard that a few times before.
Yeah. I remember, like, every time I do one, I have this cat that morphs, right? I was like, oh, you know, this bloody cat keeps coming at me, right? So anyway, yeah. So we're in, where are we? March, end of March. So when is the docu-series coming out? When's it being released?
Well, I was hoping for April, but I'm working with my video editor and his life and pressures, and my, you know, life and pressures. So we got to coordinate. So I reckon May, we're gonna mid-May, maybe late May, we're gonna be able to release it, and it will be on video on demand.
Yep.
So I mean, it's one of these things, like, I didn't tailor it for a mainstream audience. I didn't compromise in any way related to the content and try and dumb it down for people. And I basically made it in such a way that I felt like, not that it was going to be challenging, but that I don't think it's necessarily for everyone. Like, it's not designed to be a resource that maybe everyone is going to find value in. I mean, I'd like to think that maybe in 10 years or so people will reach for it, but there's not that many people who are really into this. It's not even though, you know, psychedelics have all this huge scientific interest, the amount of people who are doing it really seriously, it's not, out of, like, what is it, 25 million, 26 million people, it's not that many people. There's
Yeah.
many more people into, you know, cosplay or riding horses
Yeah.
or,
Yeah.
you know, motorbikes,
Yeah.
stuff like that. For, as you know, amazingly interested in,
Mm.
there's comparatively few people who are really, really keen
Yeah.
and enthusiastic and adventurous, because it is very challenging. It's not an easy space to be serious about.
That's what I say to people who ask me about it, and I was speaking to someone the other day, and I said, you know, this is, if you want to just have a trip, go and take some LSD or something like that, right? Just go and do something like that. If you want to just have a, this is not, something to just play around with sometimes, and I'm going to have a magical trip and all that kind of stuff, right? Some of these experiences are quite confronting and quite liberating. So people's lives can be changed from it. So I've even found, speaking to some people, I've put them off by taking it, by saying to them, because they've tried other drugs and they're thinking, oh, I'll just go and try some magic mushrooms, or ayahuasca, or smoke some DMT, or a boga or something like that, or even the toad, right? And some people still think that, oh, I can just have a magical trip, and it's not always that way.
No, no. I mean, I've had a few experiences that have taken me 6 months to integrate.
Yeah.
And that's what they're not putting on the side of the label at the moment. It's
Yeah.
like, you might not be able to function properly in your life for the next 6 months after
Yeah.
taking this.
Yeah.
That's not something that we're putting on the list of side effects right now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's more with the bigger doses, I would say.
Yeah.
But being a facilitator, that's something that I think is probably people are not really aware of, that there is like a real red pill experience, and there's this revolution in your consciousness. Like I was talking about Tom's 5 gram Iboga experience, which is not a great deal of, he wasn't expecting to go into an existential crisis for, I think it was a year or two.
Wow.
He wasn't expecting to be plunged into depression and existential despair and real confrontation with his shadow. So I think that probably ultimately how I feel about psychedelics is, you really need a existential foundation in your life. I don't know about this term spiritual practice, and I'm not sure if that's enough. I'm not sure if having, like, doing meditation and yoga, I'm not sure if that's enough. You've really got to be someone who's prepared to face the truth. I suppose that's it. You've really got to, and you've got to be someone who's prepared to do the work to assimilate that truth in your life, and probably take the ball and run with it. Because I don't think life just wants us to take the ball and just throw it to someone else.
Correct.
Or just throw it off into the sea and let it just roll around in the waves. I think life wants us to grab the ball and do something with it, and do something interesting and cool with this life that we have. So I kind of feel that there's a sort of obligation and responsibility that we have to life to how can I say, evolve, transform, get conscious, get with it, whatever it is. I've always had this real sense of profound emergency that, hey, you monkeys are in a pretty hectic sort of state of consciousness that's a bit out of alignment, and you're actually really quite out of alignment. And what's it going to take for you to really wake up to what you're doing to yourself and the planet? I've always had this profound sense of, like, there's always been this shock, this kind of awe or inspiring sort of it's almost being shaken a bit, shaken awake, going, hey, come on, wake up, get with it, get onto it. You've got there's some contingencies that we got to be aware of here, not just drone world,
And that's the thing. I mean, you mentioned before the high dose, like I call them God doses, right? I know a couple of shamans who, unfortunately give people large doses, and these people are really unprepared for that kind of stuff, right? So it does take someone like yourself to be able to scope the people properly and understand the fact, I can give this person the God dose, well, this person needs to have 30, 40 mil and they're just fine.
Oh yeah. Well, this is the thing. I think that pretty much everyone can take something like ayahuasca.
Yep.
But not everyone is going to want to take, or is going to find it useful to take the higher doses. Anyone can take like a low dose of ayahuasca and get something from it. I mean, it doesn't have to be, it might just be a few geometric patterns that they see, and that's enough for them. They're just like, but not, it's going to be too much for some people to really grapple with much more than that. It's going to be quite challenging. I think, it comes back to that, having that sort of foundation in the self, and having and it's not like, I mean, like the ball analogy. If you don't have your hands there ready to grab the ball, the universe, consciousness, life out there is not going to throw you anything unless you can really do something with it. And the more prepared you are to grab it and take it somewhere and do something with it, I think the more likely it is you're going to be able to really receive something interesting there. Whereas if I see this all the time, like people will come into it and they might be, well, there's different stages, but you have people who come in who are maybe total atheists, right? But they have this, they have the seeds in them. That's not really who they are. They actually might have a very strong spiritual connection. And immediately they will just open up and have this deep spiritual connection, and they're just massive transformation. There's other people who might be atheists, and they might just be like super geeky IT people who are very much in the mental scape, and they don't necessarily have a spiritual, psychic, even emotional nature that they've developed, right? And they might just have an experience where they're tapping into their own emotional pain, for example. So, and might be resistant to facing that or dealing with it, even, So there's so many different levels of readiness. But I think anyone can take advantage of what the state or the plants can give you, for sure.
So, mate, this has been fantastic. I love talking to you. I mean, I could talk, hours and hours and hours. And again, as I said last time, we're going to have you on again. It's just that there's so much to cover in this, and I want to make this more about, your documentary, which is coming out very soon, and the content in that, and what people can look forward to. So I will put a link in there to. You've still got have you still got a link up where you want to to the short video? Was it a trailer or something like that you had?
Yes, I can send you a link to the Vimeo for it's actually a crowdfunding video that we did. And I had ambitious crowdfunding targets. Got halfway there, but we're just going to be able to get over the line.
I
I
know I
think we're not
contributed.
going to be
I
able to do all of it.
definitely put some money into that. So,
Very good.
so I'll put the link
Very good. Much
into here.
appreciated.
I'll put a link to off your website to the book that you have about. If you got any questions, don't bother asking Julian. Here's a list of questions.
Yeah, read my book.
Read the
It's
book.
all there.
It's all there. But I'm looking forward to the documentary coming out, and I'm again so grateful that you would spend some time and just sharing this stuff, because I think again a lot of people are interested in this stuff, and the more and more people I speak to, the more and more confused they are as where do I go to find out some more stuff about this, right? And I know a friend of mine, recently did a session with Emma, and she loved it with her son, and it's a great thing to be able to have people that just awaken through this stuff, and I think it's fantastic. So, completely grateful to you for sharing your time with us, mate.
No worries, Greg. It's been good to chat.
Awesome. Well, guys, again, if you want to subscribe to the podcast or YouTube channel, subscribe buttons down below. I'll put Julian's links below. If you want to reach out to him, I'll put his details in to reach out to him. And in hopefully May, we get to see the docu-series that comes out. And I probably think it's the first one of many, and share the wisdom and the nature of, the psychedelic community. So, guys, thank you very much for listening, and we will see you on the next podcast.